welcome back to Better Lighting 101.
That's what people call me.
Now this is where the ordering of the list got a little hairy, as I love all of the rest of the games on this list. And I'm not joking, it killed me to put some of these to this low, but there are just better games that deserve more spotlight in my eyes. And here's the first example of this, Crash Bandicoot. Oh god, it hurts me to put this low. Crash Bandicoot is one of my favorite video game franchises, and all of the games are so good! But its first outing was so ish. That's honestly the best way I can put it. It had so many iffy design choices that overall made me scratch my head, but I don't care! It's just so good!
I really need to calm down.
Okay, since I love this game too much, I will only say this for its negative side. It's really hard. Yeah, like balls to the wall, shit to the fan hard. Even speedrunners who have trained on this game alone die multiple times. But besides that, it's a really great game. Let's start with the controls. This game is so fluent, it's almost ridiculous. You can feel every movement you make, and every single attack is so satisfying. And honestly, it really surprises me. I mean, sure, this was after Super Mario 64, so good controls were sort of a given, but the point still stands. While the story for this one might be pretty mediocre, it's the same basic Save the Princess plot, it works because of the comedic way it's handled.
You see, Crash's girlfriend serves as the MacGuffin of this game, as she's what you're trying to collect, or save in this case. But the game knows!
In fact, it seems to mock this cliche, as there are multiple parts where it makes fun of how formulaic it is. However, that doesn't take away from the fact that it is, which is much better handled in the future games in the franchise. Crash also happens to have brilliant gameplay, which combines many different platforming elements that really just show how creative the designers can make a tired idea. One specific example, the chase scene. While this was implemented in almost every single Crash game that came after it, this is where I think it's handled not exactly the best, but just with most creativity. See, in the future chases to be found in the series, you're running away from something, maybe a polar bear or a giant boar. But here, you actually get on top of a smaller boar and run away from a giant boulder.
I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty kick-ass to me. I honestly don't know what appeals to me in this game. Nope. Wait, I lied. I know exactly what appeals to me in this game.
The reason that Crash Bandicoot as a whole is so great to me is just how damn creative it is. Sony's gone through a slew of mascots throughout the years, but I consider Crash to be my favorite. And don't worry, he'll be crashing back on other places on this list.
I'm seriously starting to wonder where I come up with these atrocious puns. You know what? I'm not keeping it a secret anymore. You can judge me, hate me, flag my videos for copyright, I don't care. I love Spider-Man 3.
I know that it's stupid. I know that it has plot holes that completely tear away from you taking it seriously. And Jesus, do I know about Emo Peter. But I think that Josh's rant on nostalgic immunity perfectly explains it. I saw this movie when I was about 8. At the time, I didn't see any flaws with it, and thought it was one of the greatest movies ever made.
I still don't praise it that highly, but I digress. So, you might be wondering why I'm telling you any of this. Well, it just so happens I came across a Spider-Man 3 game. And it was meh.
Yeah, while it might be true that ScrewAttack considers this one of the worst superhero games ever made, I really have to disagree. And personally, I found the plot of this game to be even better than the movie. Just as with the previous two games, there are multiple added villains, storylines, and landmarks from the movies to find here. You want to know something actually pretty funny? Everyone praised The Amazing Spider-Man for including the lizard, but it actually wasn't the first one that did that. You know what was? This game! That's right! Through one of his crazy adventures, Dr. Connor gets transformed into the lizard, and you have to fight him. Good thing you have the black suit.
Oh, and that's another thing! The Venom is put to much greater use in this game. Even after Pricky Brock becomes Venom later in the game, you still get to use the black suit, which is awesome because later it gets really hard.
Not only that, but I was very glad to see the Daily Bugle missions return for the ride. But they actually managed to fit it into the storyline this time. Most of the Bugle missions take place during the Lizard's part of the game, and so you have to take pictures and record copies of the Lizard's offspring. But I really don't think I've elaborated on how many different types of villains there are in this game, and I honestly think it puts Spider-Man 2 to shame. Or at least it would if Spider-Man 2 didn't have Mysterio. Fucking love that guy. But Spider-Man 3 still has a very diverse array of villains that are all very interesting to find out about and listen to. Even if they constantly monologue, just keep talking, over and over.
Honestly, I find this game to be really underrated. Everyone seem to focus on the negatives of it when there are so many positives to be found. And hey, even if you don't like the game itself, you can still swing around New York City, because that's strangely addicting. Guys, I think I need help.
One of the upsides of doing such a massive project like this is that I get to talk about franchises that I wouldn't usually. Tomb Raider has been one of my favorite series for several years now, and for good reason. The gameplay is quite enjoyable, the story most of the time is very well created, and Lara Croft is just fine by me. Sort of like a female version of Max Payne. But we'll get to my good old friend Maxie later. For now, Tomb Raider Anniversary. The original Tomb Raider is a staple of the PlayStation, and was critically praised at the time of its release. But looking at it now, it's dated, to say the least. But Sony didn't want this to be what Tomb Raider would be remembered by, and so they released this game as an anniversary of the original game's release.
But when originally playing it, I had no idea what this game was, as it was the first Tomb Raider game I ever played. And let me just say, for a first impression, it was pretty damn enjoyable.
It was a frame-by-frame remake of the original Tomb Raider. Well, not exactly frame-by-frame, but close enough. All of the cutscenes were made newer and look a lot better, and the boss fights have been revamped to even better than before, and the voice acting is still pretty bad, actually.
Hey, well, they can improve on everything.
This game also had many more things to explore. While Laura's mansion was featured in the original, it certainly wasn't this detailed. They've actually converted the manor from a small little tutorial to a huge puzzle. Every time you turn a corner, there's something new. And what's actually really intriguing is the fact that you don't get to solve the entire puzzle until you beat the game. Every single time you beat a chapter in the game, you unlock a little more of the puzzle. But enough about how this is a great remake, let's talk about how this is a great game in general. The story is really fascinating, and I can see how people connect this to Uncharted. Lara is hired to find an age-old treasure, but in adventure fashion, things do certainly go wrong. And honestly, I started to realize that right after I got attacked by a huge T-Rex. And now, my exact reaction whilst first playing through the game.
This game is so fun! This is so fun! This is great! Oh, okay, it's a cutscene. Oh, never mind, it's quick time events. Let me just do this.
Alright, that might have been a little exaggerated, but you get my point. And we come to one of my first inspirations to do this list. When I said that I've been playing platforms for almost my entire life, I wasn't lying. I played Ratchet & Clank when I was 6. Still not my first one, though. Anyway, this was in between the time where I sucked really badly at games and where I became mildly subpar at games. But unfortunately, this was one of the games that I sucked at, so I actually didn't get around to playing this until recently. I mean, I had played other Ratchet games and even beat Size Matters, but this was definitely one of my favorites from what I've played. One of Ratchet's best features, which I sadly never hear getting talked about, is its stellar soundtrack. I know that later games nailed this in much better, I know that nowadays this isn't really talked about, and I know it's a countdown cliche, but just fucking listen! Some of the most quirky characters I've ever seen on a platformer. Hell, any video game. And rightfully so, as this was actually designed by Insomniac, who was also the creative team behind Spyro, so it just kind of figures that it'd be great. But it seems the developers were also huge fans of other games, as there are multiple people inspired by other video game characters. Not joking. Well, at least one is. You know that plumber guy? Yeah, he's actually supposed to be a much campier version of Mario. Think about it. He goes down sewer pipes, has an Italian-sounding accent, and is really fat. Sound familiar? I really hope Game Informer didn't lie to me, because then I would have just sounded like an idiot. There's also the fact that this game doesn't seem to have any actual negatives. I mean, besides minor annoyances, were there any real things that pissed you off? Not from my standpoint, at least. Well, maybe Quark. I mean, I love him as a character, but he wasn't a good idea for a villain. Don't lie to yourselves. He's just so damn goofy.
Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine a day when a superhero could achieve so much just by being awesome. Read it and weep, Nathan Drake.
My sentiments exactly. This game also parodies multiple other games, such as having its own version of the BFG from Doom. You know what it's called? The Rhino. You know what it stands for? The Rip You a New One.
I don't know about you guys, but I think that's hilarious.
And while the platforming elements might be a little underused in this game, it's still there. Like the stages where you don't have Clank attached to you at all, and you're just left to wander and jump over obstacles, which adds a whole new layer of depth to something you might have considered easy before. Oh, and did I mention the weapons? No? I know. Why, you ask? Because obs is obs. But in all seriousness, the weapons here were actually pretty, well, lame. Well, by the rest of the series standards, but there's still the Rhino and the golden upgrades. You guys really just need to play this.
Hook up your old PS2, and if you don't have one, then really? Hook it up and have a great old time playing through this.
You know, I wasn't always into older games. In fact, when I was 4, I thought that Yoshi's Island was the first Mario game ever made simply because Mario was a baby. That's also because at that point I had the mind of a baby. Damn it, 4-year-old me, why were you such a jackass? Anyway, I wouldn't learn the truth until watching The Angry Video Game Nerd 6 years later. At the time, I had no idea what any of these games were, and it blew my mind. What was an NES? I didn't know, but I wanted to know. So I asked my dad for one for my birthday and asked him to get me a few games to go along with it. Naturally, he was surprised I knew what the hell that was, and so he agreed. On June 29th, 2011, I received my long-awaited treasure. It came with 4 games, and I couldn't decide which one. So I went on a whim and chose the one I recognized, Batman.
Holy fuck, this game is awesome!
Since this was the first NES game I ever played, I of course hold it in high regard. Does it have flaws? Absolutely! Do I let it get to my enjoyment of the game?
You serious?
Batman follows the events of the 80s classic almost perfectly. Well, it does take a while before it starts following the story, but even before it does, we're treated to some Ninja Gaiden style cutscene. And might I say, that Ninja Gaiden references almost perfectly fit. Look how similar this game is! You use the items the same way, the cutscenes are there, and very similarly, the wall jumping is almost essential to learn. I'm actually really surprised that this wasn't made by the same team, but they're 2 totally different companies.
And actually, this game has something that Ninja Gaiden was very lacking in. And those are the items. I mean, sure, there were some things you could pick up, but in Batman, you had all the weapons right away.
There's the gun, the super gun, the spread shot, and the Batman. What? It's not a punch, look! It's a Batman. This also happened to put the player's performing skills to the test, as there are so many specific parts here. There's one stage near the tail end of the game where unless you're very careful, it's almost a guaranteed damage right to your head. Ouch! You doing okay there, Bats? And once again, the music to this game is actually really awesome. Don't worry, I won't make you listen to it like last time, but I'm sure you can tell. It's all remixes taken straight from the movie's soundtrack, with some original ones thrown in there just for good measure. And these are some iconic chiptunes right here. Various reviewers actually use this game's soundtrack in their videos, so you might have heard it and not even realized it.
But unfortunately, this game suffers from a lot of the problems that older games seem to have. A couple of really bad sequels. But will that taint my memory of this? None at all.
I'll always have a fun time playing through this. The ambience of it is stunning sometimes, and it was the first NES game I ever played. Is this biased? Yes. Do I care? That's enough, Spider-Man! Stop it! Once again, let's travel back to the NES. Platforming at the time of this game's release had been created, but not yet mastered. In fact, this game actually went under the radar of many people for multiple years, because Metroid was released on the same day. Well, that, and it was hard as balls! What game am I talking about? Why, Kid Icarus, of course!
I'm serious, what is it with really hard games being a staple on this list?
This actually wasn't one of the NES games that I got for my birthday. After playing all of those, I wanted more. And so I went to my favorite underrated retro games website, Lukey Games. There I picked out a bunch of games that appealed to me, but at the time I was broke and Mass Effect was higher on my list of priorities. After I had scraped together some money, this was one of the first games I bought, and I didn't beat it. Hell, I still haven't beaten it to this day, but I've gotten much closer. And not only was it released on the same day as Metroid, but it was apparently part of the Adventure series, which Metroid was as well. Yeah, remind me where that went. This game actually has something that I think a lot of older games are lacking in, which is a very distinct soundtrack. But the thing is, I'm absolutely sure that a lot of you have heard these songs and not even realized it. See, after Paint was added to Super Smash Bros., they remastered a lot of older songs before the Subspace Emissary, so a good deal of you have actually probably heard it.
Oh, and about Kid Icarus Uprising. I haven't actually played that yet. I will amend that before this is done, though. I promise.
Also, when this game's not making you bite a curb, the level design is actually really creative. I wouldn't say it mastered platforming, but it's certainly treated well here. And honestly, this has got to be some of the most faithful, well, platforming in the business, because you literally jump on platforms, but not in a Bubs way, like in a fun way. It's a straight path up, and that's how you get out of each stage. Not only that, but if you walk off one side of the screen, you will reappear on the opposite side of the other, almost exactly like Pac-Man. It's really cool, let me assure you that. In addition, the story is actually handled really well. Believe it or not, it actually seems to precede how Ocarina of Time would later use time travel. How? Well, near the end of the game, Pit is locked away and sent 10 years into the future so that he can defeat Medusa. Sound familiar? Also, the game's presentation is very appealing and really shows off the better colors of the NES. In fact, even though it's a totally different mythology, it's almost reminiscent of Castlevania in a way.
The only real problem is that, once again, it's rarely talked about because it's outshined by Uprising. But like I said, one problem at a time.
My Karuba.
My Karuba! My Karuba! My Karuba! My Karuba! My Karuba!
I'm not going to go through the whole conversation of how much I love indie games anymore because I honestly think you guys get it at this point. But something you may not know is that this genre has actually been going on for quite a while. In fact, it was very prevalent in the 16-bit era for creative people to get their games registered by Nintendo. Oh, but selling, that was up to them. It is not any different for our good pal Eric Chahi, who would go on to make various other great games. But this was his first crack at it, and all I can say is, best meme ever.
The memes.
I know!
But enough talk about My Karumba. Let's actually talk about the real game.
Out of This World, which I'm going to call Another World as that's what it was originally called, is a very creative game. And in a time where most games threw a gun and said shoot, this one actually had a really unique design choice that made trying to destroy every enemy you came across so much of a no-no. One shot of the gun killed enemies. If you hold it down and release it, it sets up a barrier, and if you hold it down then quickly release it, it shoots out a stronger attack. And what's really unbelievable about this whole thing is that it never got annoying. Yeah, most times when developers tried to do some sort of creative shooting elements in their games, it really sucked and glitched a lot. But Eric Chahi made it work. But I'm honestly not surprised by that because he's a brilliant French bastard.
Another really good thing here is the intriguing use of cinematography. There were a few cutscenes, but that's not what I'm talking about. Almost every single action segment in this game is a scripted event.
Well, sort of. I don't say a scripted event in the usual sense. When I say it in this context, I'm meaning there are situations where there are things you have to do to progress. As an example, there's a place where Mike falls down and is holding onto a giant piece of fabric. You actually need to leave him there for now and go kill some enemies. When you get to a certain point, Mike lifts you up and you continue on your adventure. I like to call this type of game the cinematic platformer, which is what Chahi was stellar at making. This would later inspire games like Limbo or Oddworld, which are some of my favorite games now. The game's graphics are also really nice looking, and even though Mike and his potato-headed friends all look kind of off, it still gives off a really happy looking vibe.
What else can you say but My Karuba?
Oh, here he comes.
Here comes Mike's big line. His big line.
Favorite part.
My Karuba.
My tunga.
You know what I find astounding? The sheer number of NES games that got sequels on the Game Boy. Mario, Zelda, Kid Icarus, and even Metroid. I bet a lot of you didn't know about this little gem. Metroid 2 is a very fine successor to the original, and seems to be the developer's way of following up the story. And actually that's one thing I have to credit the entire series for, as it's all one big woven story. Anyway, Metroid 2 takes care of a lot of the quote-unquote problems that many people have with the original game. It's a much more linear experience as the entire game is a straight path from point A to B. While that may sound pretty unappealing at first, this makes this a much easier game to just pick up and play, and you don't have to keep track of where you're going. And I'm not joking there, I have on multiple experiences picked up this game on a long car ride and had an easy time. Another pretty innovative thing is that this included a save feature, which is so awesome! While this does mean that the many hidden Easter eggs from the original have been taken out, it just makes it so much easier and you don't have to kill yourself to end the game and can continue right where you left off.
But back to the story for a minute. This game actually introduced one of the most adorable characters in the entire series. That's not Ain't much, but still.
Can you guess who that character was? The baby Metroid! Yeah, a lot of people have wondered where that thing came from, and this is the answer. See, the whole point of this game is to try and exterminate all of the Metroids as you're on their home planet. So naturally, those are the bosses for this. Near the end of it, however, you find a lone egg, which reminds me quite a bit of the eggs from the Alien franchise. That among other things. Anyway, the little Metroid comes right out of it and starts following you around. Believe it or not, this is actually taken straight from the spider, as whoever a baby spider sees when it's first born is who it instantly assumes its mother is. So of course, that starts out the events of Super Metroid.
Seriously, the story is woven like a quilt.
This game also has a rather impressive score, which is really surprising. It feels very similar to the first game, but that's good, as that's one of the most kick-ass soundtracks I've ever heard. And might I say, for the Game Boy, this is amazing! It is true that the game is in black and white, but that's actually not a problem now. If you buy the game on the 3DS eShop, which is where I purchased it, you can actually toggle color that's been specifically made for that version.
So basically, if you own a 3DS, there's no excuse for you not to play this game. Go buy it!
I need to rebuy this game. My SD card broke. Oh well, you make do with what you got. I'll be playing through this soon, and so should you. I haven't talked about Metroid in a while. So yeah, I consider this game to be better than its sequel, but just by a very small amount. As stated before, Metroid was released on the same day as Kid Icarus, and thus outshined its rival. And clearly I'm a biased piece of shit, as I consider this game to be better than it.
Hey, at least there's one more reason to hate me, right?
But there's one thing that really stands out to me about this game in particular. It's hard! Like, really hard, even by the series standards. And I'm saying that almost every single thing about this game is hard. The bosses? Hard. The level design? Hard. The lava? Hard. This was also one of the first NES games that I played, as it came in the little package that I described earlier. What's really surprising to me, however, is just how reminiscent it is of other games from the franchise. Like, I'm not joking. You played Super Metroid? Yes? Alright, you played Metroid. You're a master. Go and beat it! But sometimes the levels of difficulty can reach levels of insanity, like with Ridley. This boss took me several months to complete, just because of how many hits he takes and how hard his attacks are to avoid. Another difference between this game and its sequels is the fact that getting items is almost crucial to beating the game. They're all really nicely designed as well, and it's very easy to see that H.R. Geiger's work is written all over this thing.
But I'm really bitching too much, because I do love this game. What, you don't believe me? Fine, I'll prove it to you.
First of all, Metroid's score is sometimes breathtaking. For an NES game, no! For any game, this sounds amazing. Well, most of it anyway. I mean, I love chiptunes and it's a good third of what I listen to, but the final stage of this kind of sounds weird. It just seems to be repeating the same notes at different pitches and then changing the tempo. You know what? That's exactly what it is. Son of a bitch. Also, there's the greatest reveal in video game history that Samus turns out to be a girl.
Oh, spoilers! God, it's hipster John. I can't believe you ruined that for me. You are such a dick. It's a part of pop culture at this point. Honestly, I think I should be pissed at you. How could you not know that? Duh, it's too mainstream. Yeah, but that doesn't... It's too mainstream. It's too mainstream. Okay, I'm serious. It's too mainstream. Oh. Oh. There. Now, let's discuss the iconic escape scene. I can't believe you shot me!
It is almost ridiculous how much this innovated at the time. Sure, the escape scene has now been played out by many other games, including Metroid sequels, but when first playing through this, it's a riveting experience. After destroying Mother Brain, you have to run for your very life out of the exploding planet. On the way out, you get to see everything that you achieve and reflect on the adventure you just had. But there's no time for that because... After escaping, you get the credits and see the reveal that Samus was a woman. This whole game was just so revolutionary. Before this existed, there wasn't really a real adventure game. But Metroid did, and honestly, I'm very glad that it did, as I think I'd be lost without it. Even if it is a little lame by my standards.
Yeah, I mean, this game actually sucks. Ah, damn it. I'm letting the hipster version of me get to me. Okay, quickly end this before... I thought Firefly... Do it!
Remember Top 10 Killjoys? Good. Let's keep it that way. Alright, it wasn't that bad of a video, but I've certainly made better. In that, I briefly touched upon how I've loved retro games since I was very young. And if this video hasn't proved that to you enough, well, then let this set the standard. I love DuckTales, but the thing is, the remastered version exists.
Yeah, I consider this game good enough to be put on 2 different places on this list. Is it cheating? Perhaps. Do I care? No.
I remember seeing the trailer for DuckTales Remastered when it was announced at E3 and was instantly excited. I looked forward to playing through all the things I'd missed since I was smaller. And while I still do think that the Himalayas level can burn in hell, I really do love this game. It was developed by WayForward, a company behind the Shantae games and some other games that are based on some Cartoon Network shows. But do you know what a staple of WayForward is? Jake fucking Kaufman. And damn, he doesn't disappoint here. All of the original tracks have been beautifully recomposed to sound even better than the originals. Yes, even the Moon theme. And I didn't even think you could top that. And what's surprising to me is that even though it's not using chip tones, Jake still manages to give a retro feel and encapsulates the original feeling perfectly. But as much as I'd like to spend this entire segment talking about how much I love Jake's work, I really do need to discuss some other things. DuckTales Remastered has not only remade the original levels, but also added many things. For one, the story is way more involved than the original game and actually feels like it would be something featured in the show. And speaking of that, they got all the original voice actors to record lines, and I love it!
Basically, they took the game that already had the vibe of the show and made it you feel like you were playing through a full episode of a full season of DuckTales.
The graphics, of course, have been updated, and once again, do not disappoint. While they don't look exactly like the show, they do remind me of it quite a bit. Also, as much as I hate to admit it, there were some lazy design choices that were corrected in this version. For instance, you know how in the original game, after completing all the levels, you had to play through the Transylvania stage again? Well, now there's an entirely new level. It might be extremely frustrating, but not in an unfair way at all. It puts many of the obstacles found in earlier stages and combines them all into one large thing. The lava and bats play an especially important role here, in fact.
But wait, bats? That can only mean one thing! Oh god, he's back!
And better than ever, Count Duckula has made a wondrous return, and the boss fights have become even more complicated. But in a good way. Now the Fish's Count goes through a variety of different stages before you get to fight its ultimate one. And might I say, it's a blast to play through, as is this game.
You know what? It's an even better way to end off part 2 of my what? What do you mean I already ended part 1 like this? You're the unoriginal hack. No,